Can you have you quiet down? Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ed Selich, president of Speak Up Newport. For those of you that are shielding your eyes, I'm trying to get someone over here to lower the blinds, so hopefully we'll get someone here pretty soon, or the sun will go down, one or the other. Welcome to the September program of Speak Up Newport. First of all, I want to give a shout out to the bungalow for all the refreshments provided out there. Please support the bungalow. They support Speak Up Newport, great restaurant in Corona Del Mar. So when you're out for family dinner or something, go out and support them. Our program tonight is a discussion on local news. And when our board was trying to figure out what program we were going to do this month, we said, well, let's have Tom Johnson come and tell us what's going on in Newport Beach. And so Tony Petros and I were sitting down. We were the ones in charge of putting the program together. And I says, well, I'm not sure Tom really knows all that much about Newport Beach, but he does know a lot about local news, and it's something that he has a passion for. So we came up with the idea to invite Tom to talk about the change in local news. I know when I first got started working over in the city of Huntington Beach, we had a Huntington Beach Costa Mesa Daily Pilot. I don't know how many other versions there were going around, and we had beat reporters running around City Hall. These guys, you guys remember Bob Barker? He was always running around the planning department trying to find something. Today I don't know what reporters do. Go on the internet? I'm not sure. Maybe these guys will tell us. But anyway, local news has certainly changed, and so we've got this great panel. Tom was able to put together the panel, bringing in Tony and Bill. So first of all, just a little bit about Tom. He's the owner and publisher of Stu News Newport and Stu News Laguna. It's a community online newspaper reporting everything in Newport and Laguna. He was formerly the longtime publisher of the Daily Pilot. That's where I first met him. During his work career, Tom served on numerous committees and won multiple accolades, including Newport Beach Citizen of the Year and Costa Mesa Man of the Year. Tom attended San Diego State University after growing up in Pleasanton, California. He has 2 daughters, Ashley and Victoria, 3 grandchildren, and his hobbies include golf, reading, and collecting Puma shoes. Really, Tom?
We're up to 75 pair now, just FYI.
So joining us with Tom is Tony Dodero. He's currently the public information official for public affairs for the city of Costa Mesa. Before joining Costa Mesa, he had a number of communication jobs, I should say, in private education. Before that, he was employed in the news media for more than 20 years, worked as an editor for the Long Beach Press-Telegram. He was also the director of online news and the editorial director of the Daily Pilot and the 7 other community newspapers at the time. He's also an adjunct communication faculty member at California State University, Dominguez Hills. He's also taught journalism at Orange Coast College. He did that for 10 years. He's got a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism from Cal State Long Beach and a master's degree in communications from LaSalle University. And he's also currently a member of the California Association of Public Information Officials. And then finally...
Was that too long?
Ooh. What was that, 4 pages?
Do we have time left for the program?
I actually condensed this. This was actually 6 pages.
Was not.
And then we have Bill Lobdell. Bill's a Corona Del Mar resident. He oversaw the editorial operations of the Daily Pilot for a decade, starting in 1990. That's where I first met Bill also. Same thing with Tony. That's where I met Tony. Before he did that, then he became a reporter and editor for the Los Angeles Times. He's also headed up communications for the city of Costa Mesa. Did you have Tony's job?
Did. I followed him twice.
Tony had my job.
Oh, Tony had your job. Okay.
No, I followed him, yeah.
Just get it straight.
Did he have cream in his coffee or you just get it black?
I don't know.
And also the Irvine Company. And Bill currently produces and hosts a popular local history podcast called Newport Beach in the Rearview Mirror and a podcast for the city of Newport Beach called Deep Dive in Newport Beach. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and take it away.
Great. It's good to be here. Can you hear me okay? Am I close enough, or do I need to pull this forward? Is that better? Okay. First of all, let me tell you, it is so great to have Bill and Tony here. We've had such a wonderful career together. I could have never done the things I wanted to do and been successful at the Daily Pilot without these two guys right here. They did so much, and I'll get to them in just a sec. I just want to recognize a couple of people that are here. Ed was very nice. Thanks for the introduction. He mentioned that I was the owner of Stew News. I'm one of the co-owners of Stew News, and I have two partners in the audience, Shana Stabler. Shana, raise your hand. Shana was also the person that was instrumental in starting and developing Stew News Laguna not long before, but before Lon and I came aboard for Stew News. And you could tell all your friends, Stew stands for Stu Saffer, who started Stew News Laguna, Shana, and when we brought it to Newport Beach, we kept the name. But I walk down the hallway and stuff, or people go, "Hey, Stu, how you doing?" Oh, great. So I answer to that too. The other one is, and when I talk about two great editors that I've been fortunate enough to work with, the next one is really a special editor. It's not often that you can say that you've slept with your editor. I mean, certainly I didn't sleep with these two. But Lon and I used to be married. She's my ex-wife, and I love her to death. She is the person that makes Stew News successful from an editorial standpoint. Lana's out here. Raise your hand, Lana. Lana does everything to keep the rest of us in line and everything like that. So she's great. And then we have two columnists here that I'm really proud of. I know the columnists do it for the big pay, but we like to think that they love the product too. But I have Nancy Gardner over here, former mayor and everything, writes wonderful, great stuff for us. Then I have Gary Sherwin over here. Gary is the president and CEO of Visit Newport Beach, and he writes a tourism column that is great. So thank you for what you guys do. I really appreciate it. So I'm up here with you two guys, and I thought we'd start off and just talk about. Well, first of all, is Nancy Jones here? Okay, I got a text from somebody who said her grandfather started the Newport News, and he didn't start it. He was a publisher from 1926 to 1941. So I thought I'd introduce her if she was here, but forget I even brought her up. So I came to the Daily Pilot in 1991. I walked in, they said, "This is your editor. This is Bill Lobdell." And Bill and I kind of looked at each other at this sad thing that was the Daily Pilot at the time, and trying to figure out where we were going to take it. Why don't you go back to those days, Bill, and tell everybody like what you saw at that point, some of the things you did to kind of bring it into the limelight.
Thanks, Tom. This is going to sound like glory days, which it is. And it was I think the 90s. There were a couple of decades that were the glory days of news in Newport Beach, and the 90s was one of them. And we came into the Pilot. It was in shambles. It had been owned by newspaper chains for 10 years, I think, maybe 15 years, and they had run it into the ground. So there was one ad in the newspaper each day, and the cast of characters were insane. I mean, it would be a great, like a Parks and Rec type show. I had a woman that was heading to a council meeting in a bikini top, and she couldn't figure out why I wouldn't let her go to that. We had two people that I had to give hygiene lessons to. They had to take showers and baths before they come to work. So it was a very, very motley crew. There was some good reporters, so that was sort of the building blocks. Tony came on board as an intern, and I think he got laid off 3 times before we hired him permanently because it was so precarious, the financial situation. And it was Tom can take it from when he came on board, but it was really basic stuff. Let's cover the city. Let's cover it from if you get born in Hoag Hospital, you're going to be in the paper. If you graduate from even elementary school, I think you're going to be in the paper. If you get a DUI, you're going to be in the paper. That was
Way more, right?
that was controversial. And I had a guy who, and then I'll get off the mic, but I had a very famous person in town who got a DUI, and Tom and I had a deal that if either of us got a DUI, we'd be on the front page. So cut down on the drinking quite a bit. And so this guy was super famous. He got a DUI. I get a call Saturday morning. Hey, Bill, I don't know how I got his phone number, my phone number, but, hey, Bill, I've been a bad boy. I got arrested for DUI. It's going to wreck my career if it's in the newspaper. And by the way, and he laid out all these gifts he can give me. And they were fabulous gifts if I would just pull his name from the paper. And we didn't. And he got it. It was sort of it was national news.
I think it was in Sports Illustrated.
ESPN.
Yeah, it was.
Anyway,
Yeah.
It was all over the
Sports
place.
celebrity list.
Yeah, he never talked to me again. But so you were going to be in the newspaper, and if you did wrong at City Hall or at the school district or whatever, you'd be in the newspaper. It was an incredibly vibrant paper. It really covered the community. It loved the community. We were a community cheerleader. And so we were probably the head cheerleader for the community and the head watchdog and the head reservoir of information. I forget the other leg of our
Community forum.
Opinion,
yeah,
community forum.
people to express their opinions, and so that's how we built it editorially. Tom built it on the business side and also helped a great deal editorially. And we went from being, I think it was the worst paper in California to being voted the best paper in California. So it was a really nice triumph. And the last thing was it went from losing $250,000 a month to the last year I was there. It was, I think we took in $6 million and we made $2 million. So that's, I don't know I'm not a math guy, but 250 times 12 versus making $2 million. So it was this guy that did a lot of that work. So
Thank you, Bill. Tony, early recollections.
Early recollections. Well, I remember the girl who wore a bikini to city council, and one of my first beats to cover was Newport Beach, and Clarence Turner, right out here, was on the council at the time. It was a great learning experience because there's somebody from the police department in here, but the police chief at the time got busted for sexual harassment and other things. And so that story, I kind of wrote, Bill knows this, but I wrote that story for a full year writing, 2.5, yeah, probably. So I really cut my teeth at the Daily Pilot and covering Newport Beach. And so I would, just because we're talking about the media landscape, at the time when I covered Newport Beach, it was the Daily Pilot. We were not owned at that time by the LA Times. The LA Times would send reporters to City Hall. The Register, sometimes they'd send 2 reporters to City Hall. The Register would send 1 or 2 reporters to City Hall, and of course the Daily Pilot. And then when big stories hit, all the major media would cover it. So completely different than it is today. I'm the public information officer for the city of Costa Mesa, so I have to deal with the media on a daily basis. And reporters never show up to our city council meetings, ever. They will call me. In fact, the reporter who covers Costa Mesa for the Daily Pilot lives in La Cañada. And so she will call me, and she does all her reporting remotely. She never shows up at City Hall. She's never been to my office. But back in the day, when I was covering Newport Beach, I remember walking around getting stories. Got kicked out of the city. What was Bob Burnham? Was he the city attorney at the time? I remember he kicked me out and threatened me for eavesdropping on something.
guilty.
Yeah, guilty. No, but the thing that I loved about the Daily Pilot, especially, the lead. I don't have to suck up to him anymore, but the leadership of Tom Johnson and Bill both. They were such dynamic leaders, and they believed deeply in the community and covering the community the best that we possibly could. And they kind of talked about the different things like community. We took being a community watchdog serious, so we report the stuff that we needed to report, but we also took serious the other three prongs, which were paper record. You were born here, you die here. We're going to write about you. Public, the forum, the community forum. So if you had an issue with, and back then we had editorials. We actually wrote editorials, but they don't do that in the Daily Pilot anymore. But if you had an issue with one of our editorials, you had the right to rebut it and write something back. And that was a pretty vibrant piece of our paper too. And then finally was what they talked about was the community cheerleader, which if I remember right, when the Times bought us, they had no idea what that was all about. But the community cheerleading meant that, the community that you cover, you also have to love that community and cheer for that community when it does great things. And so I think those four things were the secret of our success, and we took it a long way and did a good job.
I'm adding a fifth tonight.
Okay.
So we're the watchdog. We watched everything. These guys broke some terrific stories. They got a guy from City Hall that was taking money, went to prison.
That was school district.
No, there was another one for the school district. Let me tell the
Wagner.
story.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, and when that guy got out of prison, guess what? He was walking down the street in Berkeley, and then we had a reporter walking behind him on the street in Berkeley to where he was the financial guy for a nonprofit up there. So he hated us. We got a school board, or not a school board, we've got a school executive.
Finance guy.
Finance guy that ripped them off heavily and everything, went to prison for a long time, and just a number of other things. So we did that as the watchdog. Community forum was, people wrote into us and they said, we want to give an opinion on something. We open up, we encourage that. Stu News today, we love letters to the editor, guest columns. Got Robin Grant back there. Robin's always our great city council person is contributing stuff. We love opinions. Community forum's the second one. Third one is the reservoir of information. Everything from birthdays to car washes to fundraisers to Lana could probably talk for 3 hours on this stuff. And the fourth one is the community cheerleader. When we started this back in the early 90s, as funny as it sounds, schools didn't have computer labs. They had no computers. I remember us putting things on page 2 of the Daily Pilot saying such and such school is in need of 20 computers so their kids can learn about this new thing that's coming to the world. So that was the fourth thing, community cheerleader. The fifth thing I want to add, and it sounds kind of self-promotion and things like that, but it's supporting a community newspaper, and you can do that in a number of different ways. You can do it through subscribing and being a reader and telling people about it. I have people in here that we've done stories on and help them with their businesses and things like that. And then there are advertisers. But the reason it's good to support a community newspaper, and we're going to talk about this, is because without it, you have trouble in communities. Communities aren't held accountable. They, sometimes go look up the city of Bell and or remember what they did. They had no local community newspaper, and the people up there were paying themselves in public offices over $1 million a year. So we do that stuff, and so somebody that's promoting a message or whatever through advertising and everything, we'd like to think that we're a place that can carry that. So I added that fifth in. But I sat up here in 2009. Somebody just sent me this the other day, but I watched a video. 2009, sitting somewhere, I think it was up here, with the editor of the Daily Pilot. I had left a year before, and the editor of the Register, and the three of us get up there, and it's very similar. What's the future of newspapers? And I was the first guy, and I said, gosh, I got bad news for everybody. If you like newspapers, pick up something else, because they ain't going to be around a long time. It doesn't work. It's not a model that's going to work. There's going to be other ways. Bill and I were dabbling around in some other things. We had a thing called the Daily Voice, and we were trying to figure out where we were going to take it. But the bottom line is I sat up there and said, this is going to be broken. If you're a newspaper person, you got to figure some other way to get news. The Register guy got up there and said, I don't know what he's talking about. We are so solid. This was before they filed bankruptcy about 8 times. But they were so solid and everything like that. There's, and their staff has dwindled and everything. And the other guy was the new editor of the Daily Pilot. And he talked about, how the Daily Pilot had been in this community for 100 years and they would never leave.
They're in Fountain Valley now.
Yeah, they're in Fountain Valley. So anyway,
Can I, go ahead.
what? Yeah, I was just going to say. So, what happened?
Well, the internet happened. To give you some idea, is the number of journalists since just 2008, it's been cut way over half. So we have about 60% less journalists. In the pandemic alone, 350 newspapers gone in 2 years. Over that 2008 to now, it's about 2/3 of the newspapers are gone. The newspapers that are here are just limping along. You see, the Register and the Times. I mean, the Times now is as big as the Daily Pilot was in the 90s. It's just, the writing's on the wall. No one is very few people have adjusted to the digital age. The New York Times has, Wall Street Journal has.
Stu New has.
Well, no, that's for local.
Stu New has.
We're going to get there. But readers have found an easier way to consume the news, and that's just progress. And advertisers have not embraced. They're leaving because they're going to follow the eyeballs, right? And so that model is dead. And I go on a walk most mornings, and you go see the driveways. There's one newspaper in a driveway when I did a little 5-mile loop, like one newspaper in a driveway, and that's it.
It was Marty Brower's.
It's Marty Brower's home. So that model's dead. New models are coming. They're slow coming because newspapers, they're, for how liberal the media is, and it's super liberal, they are so conservative business-wise. They're locked in. I remember when I was there and Craigslist came about, and I'm just meeting with all the Times executives, and I pull up Craigslist, and I said, this is going to kill us. They're offering free ads. At the time, the Times, if you put in a help wanted ad or a seeking job, it was like $1,000. So free, $1,000. And they just looked at me like I was, just an idiot. And, that's going to cannibalize our ads. And so from that moment to maybe 10 years later, it went from, I think it was $60 million in classified ads to 0. And they didn't pivot at all. So that's where we are now. There needs to be new models. Stu News, and the fact that it's Stu News, not Stu's News, drives me nuts. But sorry, buddy.
How about Tom?
Yeah, Tom News. But he's figured it out. If you provide good news, if you engage the community, the advertisers will follow. And I think as the years go by, more advertisers will follow because the advertisers are going to come from the younger people, and they'll be more inclined to do digital ads, which can be tracked with much more precision than newspaper ads. Sometimes newspaper ads, you don't know if you've got response from that newspaper or not, right? But digitally, they looked, they clicked. So I don't know if I.
Yeah, that's great, Tony. So you deal in an operation now. You were on the one side,
Right.
in newspapers. Now you're on the other side, some of the times you're trying to cover up something, but for those times you want to get your message out, how difficult is it to do? And also, does it add more work to you because you have to create these new streams?
Right. So I was actually talking to my boss about it today because if I want to get a story out, her main complaint about the news, which many of you would probably agree, is that they only write bad stuff. So this whole week I've been having to I've been having to combat the fact that there's like 20 feral cats living in some house, a dilapidated house in Costa Mesa. And so they write a story about that, even though we don't own the house, the city doesn't own the house, we have nothing to do with the house. except for that we red tagged it because it was unlivable. But suddenly we're all the cat people on the entire planet consider us to be the bad guys. So that's what my boss sees, and Bill understands this too because he's also been in public relations. Is your bosses never want to see bad news, right? So get that story out of the newspaper, figure out a way to, and I know that we can't do that. So my answer then is to come up with a different way to tell our story. So I have a weekly newsletter that's been going on for 8 years now, ever since Bill left because he couldn't figure it out. But I started doing it, and I'm only teasing these guys because they would tease me, and they probably will at some point. But anyway, I have a weekly newsletter called City Hall Snapshot that got started by my boss, my city manager at the time, who said, I want to tell a story about all the good things going on at City Hall. So I have in this newsletter everything that happens in every department. So police department, fire department, public works, development services, all that. Every week, I've run it every week for the last 8 years. Well, I miss at Christmas time and when I go on vacation. But a lot of my friends in the PIO business can't believe I pull it off every week, but I've trained our department heads to do that because they realize the value of getting the news out to the public. I also have a news blog that we started. So I know if I have, somebody internally that's getting a promotion, the Daily Pilot's not going to write that story. The Register doesn't even have a reporter that covers the city, doesn't even cover Costa Mesa anymore. So I know that they're not going to go write it, so I just write it myself and put it out over the news blog and then share it out over. We have 13,000 followers on Facebook, another 14,000 on Instagram, another about the same on Twitter. Nextdoor is another way I get my information out. I just share that out over Nextdoor, and we also have our TV station that we get news out over. So we've just figured out that we can't count on the media to tell our stories anymore. We have to tell the story ourselves, and so I think more and more. That's what's going to happen, especially as, like Bill said, there's how many newspapers have just dried up over the years and gone away. Cities still have to get their information out, right? If you're a fire department, you still need to tell people whether or not there's a major fire or you have to evacuate. So they have to figure out ways to get that information out to the public. And the best way to do it is through those channels I just talked about, social media, creating your own news blog or news alert systems. And that's really what we rely on.
So as Tony said, he created something himself. He looked and figured out what's it going to take to get that going. Bill has done the same thing, and we'll get to some of that. But, it's interesting, and this is not a bash, the Daily Pilot. We all work there. We all loved that place, and we built it to heights that, it just crashed and burned, over time. And so it's kind of on subject. But, I go back, I think back on those times in the 90s. Yeah, Bill says it's the heyday and everything like that, but we just didn't sit back and publish a newspaper either. We did things like, I remember, and it was either you or Marble or Tony or someone came up with the idea of, hey, let's name the top 103 people in the community.
I think you were on the top, weren't you, Clarence?
Yeah, and so we'd go like, top 103? Why 103? And it was like, well, if it's 100, it sounds so scientific. And literally, we'd write 200 names on little pieces of paper. We're on a table, and we're shuffling them around, putting them in order, and we had fun with it. I remember, if you know Dave Snowden, he was the police chief at Costa Mesa, and Dave, we used to be friends. Now we're friends. But there was a drug-sniffing dog from the police department that was going and checking the lockers, and the morning that paper came out, that dog was like number 52, and the chief of police was number 53, and he had a problem with that. So there was a lot
on purpose.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of stuff that was done tongue in cheek, but the whole thing is to get people talking about it. And so, do you remember going to the mayor's dinner when it became the deal? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you talk about it. Yeah.
So we're at the mayor's dinner, and I think it was at the Marriott Hotel, and we're sitting there. We're all kind of looking at each other, trying to think, are we ever going to make it here or whatever, because we were trying to push this paper back on track. And all of a sudden, I think it was Larry Thomas with the Irvine Company. He might have been MC or whatever, and he starts referring to people in the room as by their number. Like, oh, it's great to see Clarence Turner, number 1 over here. Hey, Clarence, how are you? Great to see number 14. And I just remember going like, hey, you guys, I think we just made it. And but so we created that. It was out of nothing. We started a thing called the Pilot Cup that still goes today, that every kid in this community plays in the Pilot Cup. And the Daily Pilot had their name on the back of the back and the front of every T-shirt of every kid in this community. And guess what the Daily Pilot did to that? They gave it away. They gave it to Costa Mesa United. We started, we started so many different things and everything. But
The Jones Cup.
What's that? The Jones Cup. We had golfers that the female golfers at Newport Beach Country Club and Big Canyon and they won their championships by like each one of them won by 20 shots. We said, well, let's have them play. So we started a thing. We got Fletcher Jones to sponsor it, and we started the Jones Cup for the top women, and it morphed into more than just that. But we were always trying to think of things, and we did that during the middle of the summer because there were no high school sports. So we were looking like, well, let's create our own sport, and so, but we did all that stuff, and then that stuff just sat there and sat there and sat there, and over the years, the Top 103 dried up. The Daily Pilot Cup was given away, and now it's run by an organization in Costa Mesa. I think the Jones Cup is still around, but there's not much to it. But so you have to always be thinking of new things and fun things. We started Stew News. I remember early on we had this thing called, like, what was it, Secret Spot or Where Is This or whatever, and we take these photos around town. And if you don't think Joe Stapleton knows anything about town, every morning when the paper came out, within 30 seconds, he'd guess the right answer, but that's why we stopped it. Anyway, but you're always creating new things. And Bill's an example of that because you've started some new stuff, right? To get eyeballs on it. And it's the kind of stuff that if you're gonna be in this business, you can't just do it the same way as always. Print the newspaper on a printing press, roll it up, put a rubber band around it, drive down the street, and throw it, and by the time it lands, it's old news. It's done.
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, it was my idea, Daily Pilot 103. So
Bill's always been kind of quiet and reserved, but it's nice. Let me mark that down.
how dare you, Tom? But what happened back in the day, what's missing now, I think it's going to come back. I'm more optimistic, I think, than maybe Tony is on this subject, is the news media was able to create or contribute to the sense of community here. So we would have, like the 103, we'd have this luncheon, and we'd have, out of the 103 people, we'd have 80 people, top people in the community come and have this celebration of them. And it was just a wonderful lunch. We always did it at the Balboa Bay Club. And I don't know, everybody came away with a great feeling about where they live and how great Newport is.
They were the entertainment.
We had them do all, it was fun. So I think that's missing. I think that will come back when, Stew News is leading the way in Newport Beach. So I think they'll have competition coming there, and I think it'll come from other things. I missed reporting, investigating, and so I started what I thought was going to be a little history podcast that would have very little interest. And I told my wife, if 20 people listen to it, that'd be great. But I kind of just wanted to get on record of some of the historical events that were forgotten in this town that I thought deserved to be remembered. And this, I just passed the 30,000 download mark on this podcast. But it shows, like, people want community. People want to be involved. The comments and the suggestions and the people saying photos. Someone sent me the other day this Newportopoly game that had all the, it was like Monopoly, but with all the Newport landmarks. So people are really into it. I think with Stew News, people are really into it. And I think that's going to, I think we're in a lull now. And I think, we need some leadership to get to the other side of this and to learn new ways to deliver the news, new ways to make community through media. And right now I think we have, next door is, that's a battlefield, I think, and I think that's sort of the opposite of community. They do a good job bringing up issues in the community, but I posted one time on there, and it was a very, I thought, innocuous post, and I just started getting hammered. I'm like, delete, like I wasn't gonna get involved in that. And so that doesn't help. I don't think that really helps build up the community. I think it's more tears it down. But I think that will evolve into to what traditional media used to do.
So I've been on Nextdoor a lot. Never anything I did, but when I moved, or when I went in on the editorial side of Laguna Beach, I was hated by people that I didn't even know. But it was kind of interesting. What do you think, Tony, about what Bill's saying about the climate changing? Do you see any of that?
I am not completely pessimistic. I do think that, I think there is a definitely a market for digital. I'm pessimistic when it comes to print. I'm optimistic when I think about digital publications. So Stu News, obviously one of them, but another one in the county. I don't really like them because they always write crappy stories about us. But Voice of OC but it's a nonprofit, right? They're a nonprofit, I believe. Nonprofit. I think you'll see a lot of that. There'll be nonprofit news organizations that spring up. Because really it's to be able to cover like what the Register did or the Times did in Orange County, it takes a lot of money, and no one really wants to spend that much money. I wrote down, I looked up what the average pay for a reporter. This is average pay in California, so that would include the LA Times and top newspapers, but it's $58,000 a year. Well, people can't really live on $58,000 a year. So when you start a news organization, you don't want to pay somebody that kind of money, especially if you're just a little small digital operation. And so they just have to run like Con does, right? Very, just believe in the community you're covering, believe in your mission, and just do the work yourself. And I think those organizations will make it. I also think the bigger ones, like there's some, you guys probably have heard of Politico. There's digital publications that have a niche that will continue to survive. But I think the days of the Los Angeles Times and Orange County Register, I hate to say it, are very they're gone. They're gone, and it's because they're just too big. They're too big, and they have too much overhead, and they can't afford to cover what people really want, which is local news, which is what Tom does.
So let me give you an example of a week, and I want to open this up in a couple of minutes for some questions and everything, but let me give you an example of what it's like to have a community news operation. First of all, our staff is not all that big. You're looking at it with Lana here, and I mean, we are very fortunate, as I said, to have Gary and Nancy here who contribute to us, and they're not the only ones. We have other ones. We have guest columnists and things like that. But it's really a labor of love. And what happened was Shayna and Stu were doing this thing in Laguna Beach. They kept calling me and saying, why don't we do one of these in Newport? Why don't we do one? And I kept saying, no. And 7 years ago, I think it was in July, I saw that the Daily Pilot made a fatal mistake. Their fatal mistake was this. They had, and this is a paper I built, or I feel responsible for building up and everything like that. We serve Newport Beach and Costa Mesa. They decided that day and announced it to the world, that they were going to cover in the Daily Pilot, Huntington Beach, Fountain Valley, Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, Laguna, Irvine, Garden Grove if need be, and all these other places, right? And I thought, boy, that's going to kill it, because try to talk a sports reporter who's already complaining about having to cover high school sports, you're going to lose like smaller high schools. They're just not going to cover them, right? So we got in touch, Shane and we talked, and Lon and I decided, okay, we're going to go do this. And so the Daily Pilot did that on Wednesday, and then we decided to come out on Thursday. So Thursday we came out with Stu News the next day, and said this is going to be your local news source, and we're just going to cover Newport Beach. We're not going anywhere else. We're going to cover Newport Beach, and so we built it on that. One of the reasons it's Stu News is because Shana convinced us that said, hey, look, we go Stu News, we can get those advertisers for the very first issue. We could be profitable from day one. So we did that. But here's the kind of commitment it takes is, and Lana and I are primarily the people that put together, Lana's the one that puts it together, but we're the ones that do the day-to-day work together and put Newport Beach together. But I'll give you an example, So Friday night I go home and the city manager sends out her update, and I start putting the city manager stuff together. On the weekends I'm putting little tidbit stuff together. And Lana's working all the time, but I'm putting these different things together that are going to be filler here and there. And Lana's shooting me over stories and saying, hey, could you do a rewrite on this? And could you come up with some headlines on this and a caption for this photo on this? And do the same thing Sunday. And as it comes to Sunday night, now we're starting to crank. And I got to write a column for Newport Beach. I got to write a column for Laguna Beach. We're doing Laguna Beach at the same time Lana and I are. So Monday, it's the day of death. And I'd like to say we pull out our hair on Mondays, but I've already done all that. And so, but we finally get it done on Monday. And, Lana, I'm dead serious on this. If Lana goes to bed, and I don't know this because we don't live together, but she goes to bed at 2:00 in the morning, that would be early. So, sometimes she's up until, 3 or 4 in the morning, and then she's right there to answer her phone at 7:30 or 8 if they have any problems getting the issue out that they need clarification on. So now you've reached Tuesday, and we got to start looking for Friday. It's a short week now because we only have 3 days. So it starts all over. We start doing the tidbits by Tuesday, writing columns, putting all that stuff together, and we do it week in and week out, 4 papers a week. I got rid of my guns because I would have killed myself a long time ago. But you do it because you love it. And here's my biggest concern that you all can help me with is I did it because I love this community, and I also know we're not going to win a Pulitzer Prize, but we try to get all the news out there. We help tons of organizations get their messaging out there. We write stories. Ask Will O'Neill, and I like Will, but Will wanted an elected mayor in this town. I was against having an elected mayor in this town. And ask Will if anybody reads Stu News, because we don't have an elected mayor in this town. And that's the community watchdog portion. You need to be able to take a position. And we're good. I see Will, we meet for coffee and we talk. I try to do that with our city council people. Robin and I get together regularly and we talk about, she tells me everything she's not supposed to tell me off the record, and it's great. So, no. But you need some passionate people. So, but my concern is, what happens when I'm not here anymore? And what happens when Lana's not here anymore? I want to try to create a business model that somebody else can move into and care about, so that that has that kind of passion. It's the same passion the 3 of us had when we were back at the Daily Pilot. So it's not like you can't find it somewhere, but we need to get this kind of a model, whether it's Stu News or whatever it is. We need local community news going forward, or this community over time will suffer. And if you don't think that, let's just take what I was talking about a minute ago, the elected mayor. It would have been fine if Will would have been mayor, okay? He would have been mayor for 8 years. But what happens, because he lives in town now, what happens 8 years later when this person comes from the East Coast and he's a developer and he's never lived in Newport Beach before, but he goes, you know how many hotels I could get down that peninsula and across, and it changes the whole dynamics of this community. And we're all sitting there. If nobody's there to say, hold on a second, wait a minute, that might not be good for this community. And that's the kind of stuff, again, talk to Bell. They had, I don't know, it was a half a dozen people up there that were getting $1 million a year in these city jobs that the community's just sitting there sucking their thumb, and it was sad. So anyway, there's an important spot for this. Many of you, or a number of you, I see in this community, we've dealt with over time. And it's great to have your input. We're always there to take phone calls. Call Lana, because I'm on the golf course, but call Lana. But that's kind of, what we're talking about. We'd love to answer questions if people have questions about community journalism and what we're doing or what we see or whatever. Anybody have anything they want to throw out? Sorry. Anybody else? No, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, you need to step up to the microphone. That's why I didn't call on you.
Okay. I think you hit it on the head, which is you have to figure out how can I systemize this in a way that has endurance. And I used to run career tech programs for Newport Mesa Unified. And one of the most powerful learning opportunities and employment opportunities was interning, which Tony can address. So I'm thinking that maybe there is a way to more formalize with the high schools or the community colleges intern programs to start building that future staff that also are very familiar with that technology. All Instagram and all that. It's like, okay, I'm sort of figured out, but I think if this is their generation and they know how to use these tools. So I just think that that's one of the paths to consider for survivability.
And I'll just tell you right now, we would love to do that. We have talked to many young kids. We've got many young kids started, and then they realize there's a beach down there that they can go suntan on and everything like that. So they're not as serious as we are.
Actually, was better in here. Have you thought of rebranding, like not Newport News, because that's already been taken, but what about Newport Beach News? And Gary Sherwin can kind of work with you to get this branded. It's Stu News. No one outside of Newport Beach that's really involved knows what Stu News is.
So let me tell you a couple funny things. So you think like, yeah, what a dumb name, and nobody would know it and things like that. Here's some funny stories. And Gary and I just met recently. We talked about a couple things, but Gary's on an airplane flying to Japan, and all of a sudden one of the flight attendants walks by and goes, "Wait a minute, aren't you the guy from Stu News?" I mean, he's at 50,000 feet or whatever, and there, if you haven't heard, Newport Beach is going to have a float in the Rose Parade, and the head of organizing that float for the parade and things like that contacted Gary and his team about that, and guess what he reads, and guess where he found his information about. So I mean, people do find that it's there. Or are we going to rename it? I don't know. We just met with Gary because Gary's the great branding guy, and we've actually talked about that. I will tell you this. On January 1 or thereabouts, we have a complete redesign of the paper set up, and it looks different. It has just some of the real quick features. There's a top area that's kind of a photo ad type deal, and when it hits, it'll pop and it'll be open to whatever's going on in town. But imagine the Hogue Classic Golf Tournament comes to town, right? Well, boom, that hits for like a day or two up there. And then during the Newport Beach Film Festival, boom, the film festival is up there. The page is going to run all the way across. There's going to be no gutter on the one side that has the little things. So you'll see broader ads, an easier read. There'll be some headline stories at the top to draw you into the page. if anybody's interested in seeing that, they can contact any of the three of us. I know Shayna doesn't leave home without a copy of it, so she'd be happy to show you. But we have worked with Gary, and the answer is we've kicked that idea around. So whether we're going to do it or not, I'm not going to commit to. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. I want to tell you, I've lived in Newport Beach since just after high school. And I remember the Daily Pilot. My dad used to advertise in it when it was a real paper. It actually had more than one section, and we were in the second section on the second page in the lower left-hand corner, and that was where his ad was. So I remember it fondly, and I remember you guys fondly, and I don't have a question. I just want to say attaboy.
yeah, thank
I'm
you.
so happy with what you're doing,
Oh,
and
thanks.
we definitely need community news. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Uh-oh, here's trouble.
Fix this for everybody else. There. So, in today's electronic edition of the Daily Pilot, which I still read, Patrice Apodaca has an opinion piece about this very subject. And in that piece, I'll synopsize. Nancy has a copy of it for you if you want. If you don't subscribe and you want a printed copy, we have
I have a
one.
copy of it too. Yeah.
She has the opinion that social media is to blame, but it also is an opportunity. And I know you folks have increased your social media presence, but it does seem like that's a natural pathway because maybe us here are the ones that are still reading it on the computer, but increasing the presence, and all the various groups that we're involved with are trying to increase that presence because, like it or not, it's where they're getting their information. Do you have thoughts about increasing your presence in social media? And it's expensive to do it well.
So, thank you. Yes, we do. So, literally, last week, we sat down with Gary and his team. And in fairness to everybody, has nothing to do with me, but Gary and his team happened to be my daughter. So, we sat down with Gary and his team, Shayna, Lana, and myself, and we talked about our concerns were the potential rebranding. We have a redesign, and how do we make a bigger social media play? And at the ripe old age of 45, I'm not the guy to ask that to. So we were there to talk to them about those ideas. And those are important things that we are looking at exploring. I wish I could say, yeah, we're going to do this, this, and this. I've just learned how to spell the new name of Twitter. So, yes.
Can I say something real quick? So, Bill's tenure at the Daily Pilot started in '91. Mine ended in 2008, and neither one of us had iPhones. I don't believe they might have been in their infancy when I left. But this is where everybody gets their news from, right? Either from their iPhone or their Android or whatever it is, and so that's, to your point. They get it from social media too. So I want to say it's something like 80% of the viewers on social media get their news from social media. So it definitely is a place that that if you want to be successful in news in any way, shape, or form, that's where you need to be. So
Great. And as far as cell phones go, I said we're doing a redesign. One of the redesigns, the thoughts behind the redesign, is I sat down with South Coast Plaza, and I said, "What do you see when you see Stu News?" Well, we'd like it to do this because it'd be easier to read on the iPhone. So that's all in our redesign. Not that South Coast Plaza is important, but
Yeah, no, as one of those few people that still receives the LA Times hard copy, I wasn't.
wait, what's your name? I'll tell them you were here. No, go ahead.
It's from my dad, but anyway, no, and yeah, it is not very interesting, but Dad likes to read it and touch it every morning. So, but what was your differentiating point? I have two quick questions. One is, what was that differentiator? You're saying New York Times and some of those others are able to keep up with that digital. What did you mean by that? And the LA Times doesn't, because they have their, you can read it online, but I think, so what did you mean by that?
Well, the LA Times is really late to the game, super late. As late as, again, I remember I was at the LA Times, editor was talking, and he said, the internet is, we survived radio, we survived television, the internet's just another thing that is going to not come and go, but just be here. It's not going to cut into
Fad.
any.
You said it was a fad, right?
It was, yeah, he just was not concerned about it. So they got a super late start, and the LA Times had a. The New York Times knows exactly what it is. It's a national newspaper. It's going to cover the nation like no other. It's going to cover the world. LA Times never knew
Its
in
identity.
the past 30 years
Yeah.
what they were. And so when we were there at the end, they had foreign bureaus all over the world at $1 million a year back in the day, which is a lot, but they didn't have local reporters. And if they would have covered California like they wanted to cover the world, or even Southern California better, they would be in fairly decent shape. But they were way too late, and so they're just in a death spiral, in my opinion. And the New York Times and Washington Post is got on the bandwagon early. So they were earlier adopters. They weren't early adopters, but earlier. And I don't see a path forward for the LA Times to. I mean, my dad was general counsel for the Times for 20 years, so I grew up with it. It's in my blood, and I don't read that paper anymore. It's just there's nothing there for me. And I don't know if you saw this, but for the sports, they're not covering sports games anymore. They print the paper at 3 p.m. so they can't cover any night games, and they've gotten rid of most of their sports reporters, and so that was one of their specialties, and they've just given it up.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to get a box score, you're not going to anything in the Times about a local game. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah,
but
no, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I just have, thank you very much
Okay,
for that.
thanks.
Identity crisis, basically.
Yeah.
But my other point, and I'm not going to discuss it in front of the whole audience, I would like to speak to one of you after. I was interviewed by the Daily Pilot in 2006, and I was so happy to come tonight because I actually wanted to pick a bone, but I'm not going to do it now.
I think I was editor then. I was editor.
Interviewed by a certain Michael Miller, I think his name
Oh,
was.
yeah.
And
Oh, yeah, okay.
if I could talk to you after,
Yeah,
I
that's
was
great.
very.
I'm sorry.
That's
Yeah.
great. Hang on. We don't.
Oh, yeah.
Hang on. Oh, were you next, Phil? I don't.
Sorry. Did you just want
No, you're fine.
I just want to say that as someone who had many clients dragged across your front pages in the heyday, I always found you guys to be fair and contextual in terms of what you're talking about with community. And that seems to be translated now to what Tom's doing as well, is there is a love for this community, and you can see it in your reporting. And even when I wasn't happy or my clients weren't happy with a lot of what you guys were saying, it was fair and it was contextual, and it indicated how it impacted the community. And I just want to thank you guys for being that way about it.
Thank you.
You know, it's interesting. Phil says his clients were dragged across. Phil was actually dragged across the front of our. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
If I can add real quick.
I too want to thank you. My children graduated from high school in 2001 and 2004, and the Daily Pilot did wonderful things for this high school coverage. They both ran cross country, and it was just incredible how the cross country scores were reported in the paper every week. And the plays were reported on. Everything that went on at the high school got good coverage, and the kids loved it. They loved The Secret Spot. They would be looking for that immediately on, I think it came out on Friday or Saturday or something. You all did a great job, and we all appreciated it. Thank you.
Well,
thanks.
Tony was the editor, but I'll take those accolades. Thank you very much.
What?
The great Clarence Turner.
Great. He was 90 years old.
Some of you may not know this, but I was the mayor back in the last century. And as such, I can remember sitting there in the council's chambers and so forth. And we'd be covered by Bill and Tony and so forth. There'd be people there from the Register, the Times, and some of those big events, even the CBS News would be on and so forth. But the one thing that seems to be missing here is we're not talking about the investigative reporters and so forth. You can talk about what you want to do, and I'm glad to hear that. But there's no one out there in the beat watching, frankly, what people do in government. And to give you a good example, Martin Brower sitting here, as you may know, was with the Irvine Company for a long time, handling their public relations. And he said that when he joined the Irvine Company, Bill Mason was the president. And he said to him, he told Mason that, he says, I don't know how I can get you any publicity in New York. And Mason looked at him, he says, I don't give a damn about New York. I'm worried about the Daily Pilot. So that's how things have changed.
Hey, Clarence, what was your highest number in the 103?
Pardon?
What was your highest rank in the 103?
What was that? What?
The 103. What was your highest rank in the top 103 that we were just talking about? The most influential, the 103.
What was
Read
that
the doc.
question?
That's okay.
I don't know. Oh, I think I was maybe just one or two, something like that. No, I'm just kidding. I don't remember.
Okay. Okay. Last question, and we're going to close up. Go ahead. Brad Avery, the great city council person, past mayor. Go ahead, Bradley.
I remember the only time I was in the 103, I was 11 spots behind the German Shepherd. And that was,
Yes, and that was on purpose. That was a beautiful German Shepherd.
yes, he was a worthy opponent, in that regard. But Clarence said some of the things that I was thinking during all this. There's way too much going on in Newport Beach to not have a robust coverage of City Hall and business in general. This town is on fire in terms of the change that's going on. We see it all over, and we may not like it, but it's rolling, and that really needs to be covered in all respects. And everyone in this room I know is paying attention, and I bet reads in multiple online papers like the New York Times, the LA Times, all of it. I wake up around 3 in the morning whether I want to or not, and I subscribe to 4 different newspapers, and I go through them by 5 o'clock. And I delivered the Daily Pilot when I was a kid in Laguna for 2 years. And I went to SC for School of Journalism, and the best thing about going there was LA Times reporters came to all the classes and talked about what was going on with the paper and about news reporting. And I'm also aware of what happened in Santa Barbara with the News Press, which is such a great paper for so long, and to be taken out that way is just absolute travesty. But to the point you guys were making earlier about nonprofit news, I think this town obviously is capable of supporting a nonprofit paper. The question is, are they willing to? And is there that much interest in having a couple of people going to a council meeting that are great writers, that are smart, and get things and get the issues in front of everybody?
We actually have, just FYI, I mean, I'm not trying to justify us. We can obviously.
I'm thinking of some kids,
No, we can obviously do a better job, but we do have Sarah Hall that watches over City Hall, and could she do a better job? I mean, we'll find out.
Well, and I believe it takes money because people need to eat.
See, that's the hard thing to do, and what we wrestle with, because is like, how do you bring on a staff? Like, would I love to hire an investigative reporter? You're darn right I would.
Sure.
But I mean, it's not gonna be, $8,000 a year to get the person that you want. Right. So what that translates to is you get support from the community in different ways. We don't charge for subscriptions, so it's not going to come from subscription money. I doubt Lana's going to reach into her pocket. So, I mean, that's the challenge we have. But I look at that every day as I say to Lana and Shana, God, we just need to make more money so we can reinvest in this community and make it stronger. Because again, I want it to live longer than I'm going to.
Can I get one?
Yes.
I know we're running long. You're totally right. This is where I'm a little pessimistic about it. For example, when we were at the pilot, there was someone that rose really high in Newport Beach society, and we go, you know what? This person's pretty new here. Let's do a profile on he or she. And so we sent a reporter, hey, want to do a little puff piece on your background and everything else? Nope, I don't want anything. Nope. This pretty prominent person. We're like, why wouldn't someone want this? It's like, it's just there's no downside to it. And so we started thinking like, okay, let's send a reporter to their where they came from and poke around. And so we had to buy, and the pilot wasn't like super rich paper, but we bought plane tickets. We put them up in youth hostel or something, and they uncovered this giant story that was trying to be hidden. That's not going to happen anymore at the present time unless you get people, and I just don't know locally if people are going to pay to underwrite news gathering, and that's what's missing, and that's what's sad about the current situation.
Right, and I think we should work a little harder collectively to sort of say here's an alternative if people are willing to support it. And there's individuals in this town that could do it. I mean, Wendy McCaw went to Santa Barbara. Everybody had high hopes. Right. She's perfectly capable of keeping that paper going.
Yeah.
But it turns out she was the worst person ever to buy that paper.
That's true.
And that was unfortunate. But this town really deserves it. Council, I tell people in a lighthearted way, obviously you can't trust government. And you especially can't trust government if government's not being watched by the media constantly. And there's not that anything's wrong with council in any town, but there's always something going on that deserves coverage.
That's what our country is set up.
Someone who works at City Hall?
Thank you, Brad. Listen, I know we ran over. I apologize. I want to thank Tony Dodero, who's a dear friend, and
Thank you.
Taking the time away from his family tonight. Bill Lobdell, also dear friend, and their credentials are editors locally and everything. Bill went through the Times and everything, but two of the most fabulous journalists I've ever been associated with. So thank you all for coming.
Well, hey, guys, that was a great presentation. I thought it was interesting how you did the Daily Pilot 103 bit. I was number 6 one year, and I just figured you drew names out of a hat. I didn't know there was actually a process to it.
No, we did make a few mistakes.
All right. Anyway, great presentation. Thank you for what you did. When you guys ran the pilot, it was the greatest. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Next month, we're going to have a program on what's going on in our local education. I think it's October the 11th. So look forward for the news from that.
Hi.
See you next month.
Hi, Nina.